The Indiana Fever just went nuclear behind closed doors, not in a rumored walkout, not in a reported contract demand, in the most visible place a coach-player relationship can break. On the court, on camera, in front of the national broadcast audience, with a superstar's back turned to her head coach in real time.
Caitlin Clark is turning her back on Stephanie White. She's over it. Can we end this thing at the end of the season? Shout out to Kelsey. You played a good game. We're going to get into that. I want this thing broken up by the end of the season. You can't afford both. Pick one and let's move on. At this point, I'd rather y'all keep Kelsey, Stephanie, and AB together in Indiana, and let's let Caitlin go elsewhere. Can we go elsewhere, please? I just want to get the hell away from here. I want to get away from these weirdos. I want to get away from this sabotaging organization. I want to get away from everything. Take a look at this.
She's been scuffling.
Stephanie White is constantly in this girl's ear, constantly nagging her, just like a gnat. Yeah. Look, Caitlin Clark turning her back to her like she don't want to hear this no more.
She don't want to hear it no more. Not she disagreed with the call. Not she was frustrated after a tough possession. She turned her back, physically removed herself from the coaching communication. In front of the bench, the arena, and the cameras capturing every sideline moment. That image does not arrive in a vacuum. It arrives at the end of a game in which the entire offensive plan was built around a different player, in which Clark was left without ball screens and without rhythm for extended stretches, and in which the coaching staff's post-game priorities revealed that the loss itself was secondary to something else entirely.
His whole game plan was about Kelsey Mitchell and her getting her streak. It was very clear, very obvious. And look, I'm not going to come at Kelsey Mitchell, and she played a hell of a game. But this thing was 100% about Kelsey Mitchell, and I think it had everything to do with them seeing Caitlin Clark climbing that MVP ladder, and they said, hell no, we are sabotaging this, and that is exactly what happened. The Indiana Fever lose to a team in the Dallas Wings that lost 8 out of their last 11 games. You could thank Stephanie White, who wanted to make it all about Kelsey Mitchell. Welcome to Keep the Vision. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share the channel, hit the bell notification, hype the video. That'd be greatly appreciated, man. I am disgusted with the Indiana Fever. I am disgusted. Stephanie White, get your bum ass in the trash. Get your bum ass in the trash. You are a fucking bum of a coach. You are terrible. You are terrible. You mean to tell me the very first play of the game was ran for Kelsey Mitchell? Caitlin Clark threw her a bounce pass. Kelsey Mitchell went to turn the corner, got fouled, went to the free throw line. From that point on, every single play in the first half was for Kelsey Mitchell. Nobody else could establish a rhythm because you did nothing else for anybody else to get a rhythm. We did not run in the second quarter. We didn't run a pick and roll ball screen action for Caitlin Clark until the last possession.
The league's premier playmaker, marginalized for an entire half, while the team lost to a Dallas Wings squad that had won just 2 of their last 11 games.
Stephanie White and Kelsey Mitchell celebrating even during a loss, her scoring streak, because essentially that is what the season is about at this point.
Celebrating in a loss. That is the image the franchise chose to show the world. And according to the rumor exploding right now, Caitlin Clark decided the press conference was the moment to say what the back-turning had already communicated. Let's build the full case. The game plan, the body language, the post-game response, and the confrontation the rumor claims followed. Every piece matters. The Indiana Fever exist, commercially and competitively, because of Caitlin Clark. That is not a take. That is the attendance data, the viewership numbers, the sponsorship conversations, the national broadcast scheduling decisions. The franchise's entire elevated profile is a function of having Clark in the building, which makes what happened in the first half against Dallas genuinely difficult to explain in basketball terms. The team most associated with Clark, the team that markets itself around Clark, that fills its arena because of Clark, that drives ratings through. Clark constructed a first-half game plan in which Clark was an afterthought, not a secondary option, not a player whose touches were managed strategically. An afterthought, someone the offense ran for exactly once before the final possession of the second quarter.
We did not run in the second quarter. We didn't run a pick and roll ball screen action for Caitlin Clark until the last possession for the team in the second quarter with like 15 seconds left. We didn't run a ball. We ran nothing for her the whole second quarter. We did not run an off-ball play for Caitlin Clark to get a look from the three-point line. Not when she got a look. We didn't run it for her to get a look until the third quarter.
0 ball screens for the league's best screen roll initiator. 0 off-ball actions for the player who has shot herself into the MVP conversation. 1 pick and roll on the last possession before halftime. That is not a game plan built around winning. That is a game plan built around something else. What is that something else? The transcript names it explicitly: Operation Kelsey's World. The framing in the transcript, Operation Kelsey's World, describes a specific coaching posture that has been visible across recent games. A deliberate prioritization of Kelsey Mitchell's offensive opportunities, her shot volume, and her scoring streak, regardless of what the game's situation requires. Mitchell scored 37 points against Dallas. On its own, that is a good performance that deserves acknowledgement. The problem is the context in which those 37 points were generated. A game the Fever lost to a struggling opponent, while their best playmaker shot 4 of 15 and visibly disengaged from the offensive system. A coaching decision that produces 37 points from one player and a loss to a sub-.500 opponent is not a success that happened to lose. It is a failure that happened to feature impressive individual numbers. The two things are not equivalent, and treating them as equivalent, which the sideline celebration during the loss suggests was happening, is how a coaching staff loses the trust of its roster.
You can look at the last few games, you can tell the whole thing has been about Kelsey Mitchell keeping his scoring streak together, even in games that she hasn't played well. They force-fed her when she was stuck at 18. They force-fed her for an entire fourth quarter and overtime to get her to 20. And it continued on through the last game, and it's continued on through the game versus the Dallas Wings, where essentially pretty much every single play was run for Kelsey Mitchell while she was on the floor.
Forcing a player to 20 points in overtime to extend a streak at the cost of game-winning opportunities for other players is not strategy. It is the coaching equivalent of managing to a personal statistic rather than a competitive outcome. Every player on the floor in that overtime period understood what was happening. Every player who has watched the film since understands what happened. Clark's back-turned moment did not emerge from a single frustrating quarter. It emerged from a pattern that the transcripts document across multiple recent games.
She just walking off from her. She don't want to hear it no more. Look at her. Look at her. Look at her. She don't want to hear it no more.
Look at her. Look at her. Look at her. The repetition in that commentary is the sound of someone watching something they can't quite believe is happening in real time. The commentator needs to say it 3 times because the image is so far outside what professional sports coach-player communication normally looks like that a single mention doesn't capture it. Let's think about what turning your back on a coach actually communicates. In the hierarchy of professional sports body language, it is about as clear a signal as an athlete can send without words. It says, "I have nothing to receive from this conversation. I have disengaged from the relationship that normally governs how a player responds to a coach's input. I am telling you, in front of your players, in front of the cameras, in front of everyone, that whatever authority this coaching relationship is supposed to carry, it is not reaching me right now." That signal lands on every teammate watching. It lands on the assistant coaches, it lands on the bench, and it lands on every viewer who sees the clip. This was not the first sideline moment that communicated frustration. Throughout the season, observers have noted the visible tension in Clark's demeanor. In certain game situations, the head shaking after early benchings, the jaw tightening on possessions where the ball went away from where she expected it, the moments where the competitive mask slipped briefly and the underlying frustration showed through. Athletes are trained to manage body language in professional settings. The fact that Clark's has been visible despite that training tells you the underlying frustration has reached a level that the training can't fully contain. The back turning is the escalation of that pattern the moment when containment stopped working entirely. For Stephanie White, that moment is not just uncomfortable. It is a professional crisis. A head coach whose franchise player turns her back on the sideline coaching has lost something that is very difficult to recover. Not authority in the abstract, but the specific relational trust that makes coaching communication effective. You can enforce rules with authority, you can run plays through authority, but you cannot create the kind of voluntary engagement that produces championship basketball through authority alone. At some point, the player has to want to receive the coaching, to believe the coaching is designed to make her better, not to manage her in service of someone else's statistics. Clark's back said she no longer believes that. The body language story is not only about Clark and White. The transcripts identify Aaliyah Boston as a contributor to the offensive dysfunction that has produced Clark's visible frustration. The specific criticisms, soft screens that don't create real separation, refusal to return the ball on handoffs, and finishing struggles around the rim that require better positioning to solve. When your $6 million center factor is not setting solid screens and not facilitating your best passer. The offense's dependence on isolation play increases by default. Clark's creation ability is highest when she has working screen roll partnerships that create the defensive confusion her passing can exploit. When those partnerships don't function, the offense shrinks. This is not primarily a Clark problem. It is a system-wide issue that the coaching staff has the responsibility to address through player development, through scheme adjustments, through play calling that creates artificial solutions when natural partnerships aren't functioning. The fact that the coaching response to a broken offensive system has been to run more plays for Kelsey Mitchell rather than to fix the system is the core of the Clark-White tension. The image of Stephanie White and Kelsey Mitchell celebrating on the sideline during a loss documented in the transcript and described as the season's current priority is not a PR problem. It is a values problem. Championship organizations celebrate wins. They acknowledge individual milestones with appropriate weight, noting them, honoring them, then returning focus to the competition. What they do not do is visibly celebrate on a sideline in a game they are losing, because the players still on the floor, still trying to produce a better outcome, see that celebration, and they draw conclusions from it. The conclusion they draw is the one the transcript draws explicitly. The scoring streak is what the season is about at this point, not the outcome, not the competitive standing, the personal statistic of a player who is not the reason the franchise has a national broadcast deal. That conclusion, held by players who are still competing in the game, corrodes the unity that competitive teams require. You cannot ask players to sacrifice individually for collective outcomes, while simultaneously signaling from the sideline that individual milestones take priority over collective outcomes. The signal and the ask cancel each other out.
So they're a team that makes it really tough on you. They don't fight the game. They keep you honest, and they make you be really disciplined on the defensive end.
Word salad. They don't fight the game. They keep you honest. A bunch of word salad.
Bunch of word salad. That phrase from the transcript's commentator reacting to White's post-game press conference is a specific kind of accountability critique. Word salad is what happens when a public statement is designed to fill time rather than communicate content. When the goal of the post-game presser is to say enough words to get through the obligation without saying anything that can be used against you. The problem is that post-game press conferences serve a function beyond the individual speaker's preference for comfort. They are the moment when a coaching staff communicates to its players, its fans, and the media what the team believes happened and what it intends to do differently. A word salad presser communicates, nothing will change, and we are not going to explain why. That communication lands on Clark's ears the same way it lands on everyone else's. After a game where she was marginalized for the first half, where she finished 4 of 15 shooting, where she visibly disengaged on the sideline, the coaching staff's post-game response was to praise Dallas and discuss energy. No acknowledgement of the play-calling imbalance. No acknowledgement of Clark's struggle within the system. No adjustment announced. No accountability offered. Just words arranged to approximate the genre of post-game coaching communication without actually participating in it. Here is the claim that is spreading fastest. After the loss, Caitlin Clark went to the post-game press conference and, for the first time publicly, directed some of her frustration toward the coaching decisions. The rumor says she pointed to the lack of ball screens, the absence of structured actions for her in the first half, and the game plan's prioritization of a different player's statistics. We are labeling this clearly. This is a rumor. It has not been confirmed. The press conference transcript, if it contradicts or supports the rumor, is the definitive record. We are not in possession of documentation that Clark said exactly what the rumor claims. What we can say is this. If Clark said anything in that press conference about the game plan, Stephanie White's reaction would be entirely understandable. Because a head coach whose star player publicly questions the offensive decisions, even obliquely, even carefully, faces a different kind of institutional problem than the one that comes from a bad game. A bad game can be explained. A franchise player's public expression of concern about the coaching decisions creates a media story that persists beyond the game, that invites follow-up questions at every subsequent press conference, and that forces the front office to take a visible position on who they support. That is the specific kind of crisis that no head coach wants, and according to the rumor, that is exactly the crisis that is now sitting on Stephanie White's desk.
I want this thing broken up by the end of the season. You can't afford both. Pick one and let's move on. At this point, I'd rather y'all keep Kelsey, Stephanie, and AB together in Indiana, and let's let Caitlin go elsewhere. Can we go elsewhere, please? I just want to get the hell away from here. I want to get away from these weirdos. I want to get away from this sabotaging organization. I want to get away from everything. Take a look at this.
She's been scuffling.
Stephanie White is constantly in this girl's ear, constantly nagging her, just like a gnat. Yeah. Look, Caitlin Clark turning her back to her, like she don't want to hear this no more, man. She don't want to hear this no more, bro. She just walking off from her. She don't want to hear it no more. Look at her. Look at her. Look at her. She don't want to hear it no more. Now look at Stephanie White when Caitlin Clark has the ball right here. She don't even want Caitlin to have the ball. She want Kelsey to have the ball. You see that reaction from the coach? You see that? They hate each other, and it's okay. I'll be glad when this thing is over. I will be glad when this thing is over. Get Caitlin Clark the hell away from this team.
Get Caitlin Clark the hell away from this team. That is not analysis. That is exasperation that has converted into a specific recommendation. The commentator has watched the game plan, watched the body language, watched the sideline celebrations during a loss, and arrived at a conclusion that the accumulation makes the arrangement unsalvageable. We are not endorsing that conclusion. Players and coaches work through difficult periods all the time. Relationships that look broken have been repaired with honest conversations, system adjustments, and genuine commitment to change from both sides. Nothing about the Fever situation is irreversible in the abstract, but the conditions for repair require things that are not currently visible in what this franchise is doing. Repair requires the coaching staff to acknowledge that the play calling has been imbalanced. Repair requires honest accountability in the post-game press conference, not word salad. Repair requires that the sideline culture stops celebrating individual streaks during losses. And repair requires that Clark receives a genuine signal from the organization that her concerns are being heard and addressed. None of those things happened after the Dallas game, and the absence of those things is why the rumor of a press conference confrontation is spreading, because the audience has concluded that the internal channels have already been tried and have not worked. Amber Cox and the franchise leadership are now holding several competing pressures simultaneously. The Fever's commercial value is tied directly to Clark's presence and engagement. Their attendance numbers, their viewership impact, their sponsorship conversations, all of it runs through the Clark variable. A Clark who is visibly disengaged, who turns her back on the coach, who is reportedly expressing frustration publicly, is a Clark whose commercial contribution to the franchise is at risk. Against that, the front office has a coaching staff they hired and a culture they built. Replacing or overruling White publicly would be an institutional statement that the franchise's priorities have shifted in a specific direction. That decision has career consequences, relational consequences, and cultural consequences inside the building. The front office cannot avoid choosing, because not choosing is itself a choice, and the choice to not intervene after everything documented this season is a choice to let the deterioration continue until it produces a more dramatic resolution. That more dramatic resolution could be Clark demanding a trade. It could be a coaching change. It could be a quiet off-season restructuring that nobody announces publicly, but it will come. The current arrangement has produced too visible a dysfunction to sustain indefinitely. The Fever lost to a Dallas Wings team that had been struggling for weeks. On its own, that is a bad loss that gets processed and moved on from. But it is not on its own. It sits at the end of a sequence that began with early benchings in the season's first months, progressed through public sideline corrections and the promotion controversy, continued through the Kelsey Mitchell force-feeding pattern, and arrived here at a game where Clark was structurally marginalized, finished 4 of 15, turned her back on the head coach, and according to the rumor, said something in the post-game press conference that she has never said publicly before. That sequence is the story. The Dallas loss is not the beginning of anything. It is the latest chapter in something that has been building since the first time the coaching environment made Clark feel like an obstacle rather than an asset. The question is not whether the relationship has been damaged. The question is how the franchise responds to damage that is now vibe. Let's be direct about what the Fever need to do, because the situation has enough evidence that a clear prescription is possible. The offensive system has to put Clark at its center, not as one option among several, not as the player who gets her set after Kelsey Mitchell gets hers, as the primary initiator around whom everything else is structured. The ball screens need to be there. The off-ball actions need to be there. The play calling needs to reflect what the viewership data, the attendance data, and the performance data all say. Clark is the reason this franchise matters. The streak culture has to end. Individual statistical milestones are celebrated in the locker room after wins. They are not celebrated on the sideline during losses. That distinction is not complicated. It is the most basic statement of organizational values that a coaching staff can make. The post-game accountability has to be real. Coaches who give word salad after losses where the game plan visibly failed their best player are coaches who are protecting themselves at the expense of the team's ability to process and correct. Real accountability, stated plainly, for the record, is how a staff signals that it can be trusted. And if the rumor is confirmed, if Clark did say something at the podium that she has never said before, then Stephanie White needs to respond to it directly, on the record, in a way that addresses what Clark said rather than deflecting it, because deflecting it only confirms that the word salad is the strategy. The house called from inside one more time. The star player answered by turning her back, checking out, and allegedly saying the quiet part out loud.